Bonjour et bienvenue à l'épisode 6 du podcast de Sur deux roues. Aujourd'hui, on a la chance de recevoir Ed Collins, qui est le président de Notio Technologies. Et Notio Technologies est un outil qui permet de mesurer et d'améliorer votre aérodynamisme dans le but de rouler toujours plus vite et toujours plus loin. C'est un peu comme posséder son propre wind tunnel. Il s'agit d'une traduction libre tirée de leur site web. Bref, sans plus tarder, je vous invite à ce premier épisode qui est en anglais. Si jamais vous avez des questions par rapport à quoi que ce soit à niveau langage, n'hésitez pas à m'écrire dans les commentaires, je pourrai traduire. Sans plus tarder, voici l'entrevue. Merci.
Well, thanks for your time. So we'll talk about Notio today.
Yeah.
That's quite amazing. I started reading about it. I'm very excited. So maybe we can start by talking about what is Notio and what it brings to cyclists and triathletes.
Yeah, no problem. So Notio originally started out as a concept within Argon 18 to put technology inside the frame of a bicycle to try and make it smarter, to work out, because one of the problems you have when you're cycling, of course, is the resistance you face, obviously the wind and the atmosphere that you're trying to cycle through, and the wheels rolling on the ground are the two major forces that you have to overcome. And the idea was to try and okay, can we get some technology? There was the whole advent of newer devices. If we look at what's happened with our mobile telephones, we don't have these large telephones now. They're tiny, more powerful than, and all that kind of stuff was starting to. And that was back in a roughly about 2015. So we started thinking, that's not going to be too difficult. We can do that. We're a bike manufacturer, and then realized it's not that easy to put technology inside a bicycle frame, because you don't want to add anything, that compromises on the strength of the frame and all this kind of stuff. And the technology wasn't as small as you would have liked, but now today it's becoming more a reality to do that. So in the meantime, what we did was we set about trying to figure out, okay, what's the biggest resistance that the rider faces. So the person on the bike itself is potentially anywhere between sort of 70 and 80% of the resistance is created by the person on the bike. And typically in the bike industry, there's a lot of marketing and promotion around, you must have this wheel, this component, all that kind of stuff, when actually the hardest thing to measure is what's the effect of the person on the bike when they're outside. So you can do it in models, you can do it in wind tunnel and all that, using that type of technology. But then when you go outside, well, you don't stay static on the bike, you move around, the wind changes and all that kind of stuff. So that's how Notio came about, was to try and solve that problem. And then the question was, how do we physically do that? And in an aerodynamic sense, you would say, okay, if you look at an aeroplane, it's got several of these sensors to detect the wind speed and all that kind of stuff. So for the pure technical aerodynamic sort of engineers out there, they would say, what we've got is perhaps not, true measuring in that sense. But it's not possible to put all these instruments on the bike like we've just been talking about. It's difficult to put it inside. It's difficult to put it outside. So through several years of work determining it, we came up with the product as it is today, which is, essentially a small microcomputer, want of a better word, with several sensors: a gyroscope, an accelerometer, pressure sensor, and a pitot tube. So it's not, it's taking these measurements, it's working with your power meter on your bike, it's working with a speed sensor on your bike, and it's making an estimation as to what the drag or the resistance you're facing. That's the thing. I mean, it's inherently very, very difficult to put something on a bicycle to truly measure, because of course the thing is, it's always changing. The wind is not constant, it's moving around, and so on. So we set about that process of creating the product that would bring all those sensors together, communicate with other sensors on the bike, like your speed sensor, your power meter, to determine the various parameters to come up with the resistance, or as more scientifically known as the CDA value, as to what you're facing when you're using the product.
Great. And I would like to know, like, who uses it? Like, from pros, just a few examples of pros who used it, and also who's the target customer for this product?
Yeah, that's a good question. So the product so typically this type of product, or this type of engineering and science, if you like, has always been the prevail to elite, or like athletes looking to find the absolute finer. So people are going to break records, time trialists, triathletes looking to refine their position. And the problem with all that, of course, is that it's not really accessible. So the point of the product is to try and democratize and allow people more access to this type of technology. So in essence, it's everything from somebody who is trying to refine their position doing a triathlon or a time trial, and somebody who rides a road bike who wants to understand, okay, what happens if so a simple thing on a road bike, going to narrower bars can have a dramatic impact on your aerodynamics, and people say, well, that's not going to make much of a difference, but it does when you start seeing stuff like that. So for those people out there who might want to look at finding ways to break a Strava segment, then that's another example. But the main one will be people triathlon, time trial, and then also we have people using it on the track. So recently, in the last week, we've had the women's world hour record, which was set using one of the Argon track bikes, but the Notio was used in the preparation for that, and the same for the British hour record that was broken the following day. So you've got a wide extreme of use cases, and we've even had people use it for things like we've got some Paralympic athletes using it on hand bikes, for instance. So again, once you've got a source of being able to generate power, and you've got a means, it's got some wheels, you can calculate the values you need, and you'll see differences in all of those scenarios as the person moves around or tries different helmets, skin suits, or whatever it might be.
Great. If we go to, like, I just received one from your company, and I'm about to try it, so I'm pretty green at all this new data coming to my life, and I was wondering, like, what would be the best step-by-step if I start using a Notio?
So the most important thing from our perspective, and what I would recommend, is that you don't worry about trying to go and test anything to start with. Is just to use it and record and get used to mounting it on your bike, pairing it with the sensors, and then physically just recording data from rides that you're doing before you go and do a specific, like we recommend that you calibrate the device at some point before you start formally testing. But you can still put it on and just start to record data and look at that data. We've got an app that goes on an iOS device, and you can see physically what happens thereafter. When you sort of got used to setting it up, then I would recommend that you do a formal test to say, okay, what you really need to find out is, if you want to go out on your, this time of the year, people, if you're riding your road bike, you could easily try something simple. I mean, I've done this myself. We tend to put a little bit more clothing on this time of the year. The difference between, it might be a little bit cold to do it, but the difference between something that's like an aero jersey versus a winter jacket, people don't realize simple things like that you're actually going to have to spend a little bit more time pressing the pedals to move just the same speed. But they forget that they've actually put on two layers that might be, it's a simple little process, or even the thing. But you get into the formal testing, so finding out your baseline, changing something so you can see there's a deliberate difference. And the other example for that would be things like helmets or the position on the bike. So if you're on a TT bike or you're on a road bike and you're in an upright position, and then you compare that to going into what you would describe as more aero position. So on the TT bike, you're into your extensions. If it's on the road bike, you might decide, okay, I'm going to hands on the tops and bend my elbows and just play around and see what those differences are. And I think the important thing is that everybody thinks there's a it's the same for everybody, the differences, but it depends because we're not all the same. Everybody's shape, size, function, mobility is all different. So so you can go off and then start to test. And I think one of the things that we've learned with the device, which wasn't the intention in the first place, is that it's like a test you do at school, right? You're able to do a really good test, and you think that's brilliant. But then the question is, can you sustain it? Does that actually stick? Does that information or does that position that you've attained actually really work? So the second half that we see people using it for is to say, okay, I'm preparing for an Ironman triathlon. What happens at mile 80? Do I come apart because I'm tired, I'm fatigued, and then all of a sudden I'm losing lots of time because I'm not able to sustain a position? And then the question would be, was that position sustainable in the first place, or should you find something that allows you to be, able to sustain the power for the full duration, but still also maintain some sort of aero position? And it's one thing, getting using the device to say I'm aero and I can do X, Y, Z, but then it's another thing using it in competition, because that's where it really counts. So we see people describe it, what's the correlation between the power you can put out and the ratio to your coefficient drag, your resistance that you're creating as you're pushing that power. And what tends to happen is, and if people don't, mathematically, you don't work this out till you actually use a product like Notio. The faster you go, the more resistance you face.
Yeah.
So it's quite important to understand what happens, especially if you're trying to compete and race 30, 40, 50 kilometers an hour for sustained periods. Even just where you put your hydration system if you're doing a triathlon versus your position on the bike and all this kind of stuff can have a dramatic impact, because all those changes, if the resistance of your setup is higher, it's got an energy cost somewhere. You're going to have to find the energy to press the pedals. You're going to have to consume more energy. So, which is why devices and technology like Notio coming in is can be really, really helpful. And then when you know what to look for in terms of data and stuff like that. But we're not just seeing it in products like Notio. You can now have products that will tell you how much fuel you're using through, a device on your skin. You've got, sensors that can tell what oxygen concentration is in your blood and all this kind of stuff. So, we're probably just at the beginning of seeing this technology to help improve, not just cycling, but, lots of sports are now seeing an increase in the number of devices like this.
This is very interesting. I really like when you mention the power ratio to aerodynamics, because that just reminded me a story from the local TT championship, where cyclists were like, I have the most aero position that I can get, and I don't get the power. So that's a very good way to measure like what's the sweet spot for you to get very powerful and aero, because it's not all about aero, it's also about power. So the fact that it merges the two data together could solve some issue at that level.
Absolutely. And I think also as well that we're TT is one area, but even if you go on things like we've had people test on things like gravel bikes as an example, and we go, what would you want to do that for? But because we've got other sensors on the device, so we have things like we have a gyroscope, which of course is measuring at 4 times a second, which is an XY axis. but you put a tire on there that's got a high pressure. Well, the gyroscope will move around a lot more because the tire is not conforming to the road, especially when you increase the pressure. Now you decrease the pressure, you reduce the tire becomes more compliant with the road. All of a sudden you've got something where actually, so again, depending on the rider, the setup, the weight that you have on the bike, something simple like that. And also now we're seeing people put extensions on those bikes. You're riding for long periods of time. You're not talking about being more aero, you're just talking about being more efficient. And this is, it's not an aero tool, it's an efficiency tool. Okay, to work out where do I want to be efficient? If you're looking to maximize absolute speed and find the fine tune a TT and break a personal best, then obviously, it's a much tighter relationship. We've even had people use the device on BMX bikes for competing in the Olympics, and you go, why would you want to do that? Because it's over in 50 seconds. But if your position on the bike and your clothing that you use, even in a BMX race at the Olympics, it could mean the difference between you getting to that final straight with a tenth of a second or 2/10 of a second. Could mean the difference between you getting a medal or not. So it's really interesting.
It is. My next question would be, so I'm supposed to attend the new session that you offer. So what can I expect from those sessions?
So that session will really help you define what we would say is a good testing protocol. So like anything else, when you're measuring something, whether it's in a laboratory or outside, you have to follow a process. Because if you want to compare, let's say you want to compare two helmets. So one helmet's a little bit more aero and you think that's the one that's faster. But what you've got to do is give both helmets a fair chance. So doing two runs, for example, just a one run with one helmet, one run with another helmet, and you're comparing the two and going, oh, the second one is faster. Whereas a good testing protocol will go, no. What I want you to do is I want you to do two tests with one, two tests with the other, and then make sure that you're building up your knowledge about how you, not scientifically, but have a good testing regime, because you're not going to be using the same equipment for forever. You're going to come back and you're going to want to do it again. And it's a bit like when you test your fitness, you tend to recreate the same environment. So if you do it on your turbo trainer and you do a 20-minute test, you tend to try to, a good advice would be you recreate the same situation. If you go outside and do a hill that you normally do for 1 minute to see what your 1 minute all-out power is, you don't tend to go and try and do it on 5 different hills. You go back to the same place, so you have a comparison. And aero testing is no different. And what we've learned is, because you're dealing with an environment outside, you have to come with some sort of what we would describe as protocol that will help you do that. And the consultation that we'll do will just basically help you do that. So it's okay, I have got 2 helmets, I am going to test them, or I've got 2 jerseys or two jackets I want to test. I want to learn how to do that properly. And then more importantly, you want to look and see what's happening with the data. How do I pinpoint that I've got good information? And one of the things with the product that we've spent a lot of time on is trying to make sure that when you do some of these tests, the software starts to do a lot of the work for you in terms of determining when something is, has caused an error or is not, it's not quite what you expected. The system can try to pinpoint, oh, look, in that scenario, we're not seeing the consistent data we need. So we recommend you perhaps don't want to use that information. And it's not really difficult. You just redo the run, and you've got you can go back and start to. So it's learning how to use the device, test with the device, and analyze the data. That's the purpose of the consultation.
This is very interesting, because from a blogger perspective like mine, I always get like press releases with people claiming they have the best over the industry. So that tool will help me really validate if it helps.
Yeah, and I think as well is that it just gives you that credibility and go, and it works both ways, right? Because when a brand is genuinely, and a lot of brands will spend a lot of time and effort validating their products, and of course, when you add an extra layer of credibility and say, I've independently done this myself using this device, then, and I have got a good testing protocol. Here's my protocol. I use an AABB testing protocol. I use the same stretcher road or whatever it might be, or I use a velodrome, whichever. You're just giving more credibility. And it's probably, in that case, and then equally it works the other way where somebody claims and then you're not getting that same claim. You can go back to the manufacturer and say, hey, I'm not getting it. So, is there something I've done or something, so you've got a little bit more information because there is a lot of, unqualified information, I guess, in some cases, or unvalidated. It's unvalidated. And one of the things we did as well is, because we're a new product, a lot of people ask the question about, well, okay, so that's great, Mr. Notio, but how accurate is your product? So we had one of the top universities in the world, the Delft University in Holland, who worked with the Dutch Federation, and again, in terms of their credibility, those guys won an awful lot of medals at the Olympics. But they used the device. They have several devices in their training. But one of the things they had to do was validate the quality of the data that they were getting from the device. And so there's a document, a study validating the test and the methods they use to determine whether the Notio was capable of doing that or not. So that's not us doing it. That's not a manufacturer. That's an independent study, and I believe there's another one coming out of Switzerland very soon where they say exactly the same thing. We went on, we tested, we got the results we expected, and it's obviously positive for us, but we had that independent validation, and they took the device and they put it in a wind tunnel to measure the accuracy of the wind speed readings and all that kind of stuff. And consequently, we're going on now to do some more interesting stuff with those guys to test more things. So it's really exciting. So again, we're making sure that we've got that validation outside of just our own things.
Amazing. I think that summarizes pretty much every question I had. I know we booked an hour, but I mean, it's so comprehensive. Like the answer you gave were so comprehensive that it fulfilled everything I needed to write my article. So thank you for your time. And I look forward to, I'm going to test the Notio later today. And I look forward to that testing protocols and that consultation with the team to better understand how I can make the most out of this tool.
No problem at all. You're very welcome, John, Philippe. And the other thing I would say is that with the device, when you first, when you're pairing the sensors and stuff like that, it's just make sure you just for the first time, give yourself a little bit more time to make sure, because you're asking the device, it communicates with your phone via Bluetooth, but then in addition, it also has to talk to your power meter and your speed sensor. So it's just going through that process to get it set up. Once you do that once, it's like a head unit. It always knows the stuff is there, so on. But you should be fine. But obviously we're here, and we have lots of support to help people get the most out of it.
Amazing. But so far, it paired so quickly. I was quite surprised. Like, I had much more trouble in the past pairing my head device with the RPM widget they give with it. I don't know if I was lucky or if it's the usual, but it all paired like that, and I think I'm ready to roll.